You've lost it all, or you're watching it crumble. The job that provided stability, the savings you spent years building, the business you poured everything into. The bills are piling up. The phone won't stop ringing with collection calls. The shame is suffocating, and you're wondering where God is in the middle of this disaster, if He sees you drowning, if He cares that your world is falling apart. Here's the truth. God holds you through financial ruin in ways that don't make sense until you're in the middle of it. The first way God holds you is through supernatural provision that makes no sense on paper. When you're in financial ruin, when the math doesn't add up, when you've exhausted every natural resource, that's when God's supernatural provision becomes most evident. You'll find money in places you forgot you had it. Checks will arrive from unexpected sources. People you barely know will feel prompted to give you exactly what you need at exactly the right time. Bills will get reduced or forgiven without explanation. And you'll recognize that this isn't coincidence. This is God showing you that He can provide through means you never considered, through channels you didn't know existed. Think about Elijah and the widow of Zarephath in 1 Kings 17. The widow was down to her last handful of flour and a little oil, one final meal, and then she expected to starve. Then Elijah showed up and asked her to make him bread first, promising that her flour and oil wouldn't run out. It made no logical sense. She had almost nothing, and this stranger was asking her to give from her lack. But she obeyed. And Scripture says, "The jar of flour was not used up, and the jug of oil did not run dry." Day after day, the provision kept coming supernaturally. It defied every natural law, but it sustained her, her son, and Elijah through the entire famine. When financial ruin hits you, you'll experience your own version of the widow's jar. You'll look at your bank account and wonder how you're still eating, how your lights are still on. The numbers won't add up. Because God is providing supernaturally, stretching what little you have further than it should go, multiplying your resources in ways you can't track or measure. This supernatural provision often comes through people. Someone will pay a bill for you without you asking. A stranger will hand you cash. A friend will show up with groceries. Your church will take up an offering. People who don't know your situation will feel pressed by God to give to you. And you'll be humbled by the realization that God is holding you through human hands, through people He's prompting to be His provision. Here's what's vital. This supernatural provision often requires you to use what little you have first, just like the widow had to make bread for Elijah before her flour multiplied. God will ask you to give when it makes no sense, to tithe when you can't afford it, to sow when you're in famine, to be generous when you're in lack. And when you obey, when you give from your poverty, that's when the multiplication starts. That's when the supernatural provision kicks in. That's when you discover that you can't outgive God even when you have nothing. The supernatural provision won't always make you wealthy. It won't necessarily restore everything you lost immediately, but it will sustain you. It will meet your actual needs even when your wants go unmet. It will prove to you that God is your provider, not your job, not your savings, not your business, not your own ability. God Himself. And that revelation, that shift from trusting in your resources to trusting in your provider, is worth more than everything you lost. Because once you know that God can provide supernaturally, you'll never fear financial ruin the same way again. The second way God holds you is by stripping away the false security you were trusting instead of Him. Financial ruin exposes what you were really trusting. When you had money in the bank, you said you trusted God, but your peace came from your savings account balance. When you had a stable job, you claimed God was your provider, but your security came from your paycheck. Financial ruin strips all of that away and forces you to confront the reality of what you were actually trusting. And most of the time, it wasn't God. It was your own resources, your own abilities, your own financial stability. Think about Job. He lost everything: his wealth, his livestock, his servants, his children, his health. Everything that gave him status and security was stripped away in a single day. And in his loss, Job said in Job 1:21, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Job recognized that everything he had was on loan from God, that his security was never in what he possessed, but in who God is. When financial ruin hits you, God is stripping away your false security so you'll find your real security in Him. He's not being cruel. He's removing what you were leaning on that wasn't strong enough to hold you, so you'll lean on what is: His character, His promises, His faithfulness. The stripping feels brutal because you're losing what felt like solid ground. But that ground was sinking sand, and God is moving you to the rock. This stripping reveals what's truly valuable. When you lose money, you realize that relationships matter more than possessions. When you lose status, you discover who your real friends are. When you lose your business, you remember that your identity isn't in what you do, but in whose you are. God is also stripping away pride and self-reliance. You're forced to ask for help, forced to accept charity, forced to admit you can't do it on your own. And that humbling is actually God holding you, because pride makes you fragile, and self-reliance makes you isolated. Here's what's essential. God isn't stripping you to leave you naked and exposed. He's stripping you to clothe you with something better: His righteousness, His provision, His peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. He's removing what you thought was security, so He can give you actual security that can't be shaken by market crashes, job losses, or business failures. The stripping is temporary. The security He's building in you is eternal. The third way God holds you is by revealing who your true community is. When you had money, when you were successful, when you could afford to be generous and pick up the check and host gatherings, you had a lot of people around you. But financial ruin reveals who was there for you versus who was there for what you could do for them. Some people will disappear when your status changes. Some relationships will fade when you can't maintain the lifestyle that kept you connected. Some friends will distance themselves because your financial struggle makes them uncomfortable or reminds them of their own vulnerability. And while that loss hurts deeply, it's also God's mercy, because He's removing people who weren't truly for you, people whose presence in your life was conditional, people who would have abandoned you eventually anyway. But God will also reveal your true community through financial ruin. People you didn't expect will show up. Friends who have every reason to judge you won't. Church members you barely knew will rally around you. Strangers will become like family. And you'll realize that God has been building a support system around you all along, people He positioned for this very moment, relationships that needed crisis to be fully revealed. Think about Ruth and Naomi in the book of Ruth. After Naomi lost everything and was returning to Bethlehem in poverty and shame, she told her daughters-in-law to go back to their families. Orpah left, but Ruth stayed, saying in Ruth 1:16-17, "Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God." Ruth's commitment to Naomi wasn't based on what Naomi could provide. Naomi had nothing. It was based on covenant relationship, and that covenant relationship became the foundation for God's provision for both of them. Your financial ruin is revealing your Ruth relationships. The people who aren't leaving even though you have nothing to offer. The people who are committed to you beyond what you can do for them. The people who see your value beyond your financial status. These are the people God is using to hold you. They're bringing meals when you can't afford groceries. They're paying bills without being asked. They're offering places to stay. They're providing encouragement when shame is overwhelming. They're praying for you when you're too broken to pray for yourself. They're practical expressions of God's love, God's provision, God's commitment to hold you even when everything else has fallen apart. Here's what's fundamental. Don't isolate in your financial ruin. Don't hide in shame. Don't push away the people God is sending to help you because pride makes you want to handle everything on your own. Let your community hold you. Accept the help. Receive the generosity. Because God isn't just holding you directly, He's holding you through the body of Christ, through relationships He's been preparing for this season. The fourth way God holds you is by teaching you what actually matters in life. When you're in financial ruin, when you've lost the house, the car, the status, when you're stripped down to bare essentials, you start to see clearly what actually matters and what you thought mattered, but doesn't. You realize that your kids don't need expensive toys or fancy vacations. They need your presence, your time, your love. You discover that your identity isn't in what you do for a living or how much money you make. It's in being God's child. You learn that relationships are more valuable than possessions, that peace is more precious than wealth. Jesus taught this in Matthew 6:19-21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Financial ruin forces this lesson from theoretical theology to lived reality. You watch your earthly treasures get destroyed. Market crashes eliminate your investments. Job losses eliminate your income. Business failures eliminate your wealth. And in the devastation, you're forced to ask yourself what treasures you've been storing in heaven. What parts of your life have eternal value? God is teaching you through financial ruin that your worth isn't in your net worth, that your value isn't in what you own, that your significance isn't in your financial status. These are hard lessons because culture has been screaming the opposite your entire life. Financial ruin strips away all of that and forces you to find your identity in something deeper, something that can't be shaken by economic circumstances. You're also learning contentment in ways you never could have when you were financially comfortable. Paul wrote in Philippians 4:11-12, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. Notice Paul says he learned contentment. It wasn't natural, it wasn't automatic. It came through experience, through going through seasons of plenty and seasons of want. Your financial ruin is the classroom where you're learning contentment, where you're discovering that joy doesn't come from having everything you want, where you're experiencing that peace isn't produced by financial security. Here's what's revealing. Don't waste your financial ruin by only focusing on getting back what you lost. Don't spend this entire season strategizing about how to rebuild your wealth without learning what God is teaching you about what actually matters. Because if you get back to financial stability without learning these lessons, you'll just repeat the same mistakes, worship the same false gods. But if you let God teach you through this season, when restoration comes, and it will come, you'll steward it differently because you'll know what actually matters. The fifth way God holds you is by positioning you for greater purpose than you ever could have walked in if you'd remained financially comfortable. Your financial ruin isn't the end of your story. It's the middle chapter that makes the ending powerful. God is using this devastating season to position you for a purpose you couldn't fulfill from a place of comfort and security. He's developing in you through this fire qualities that will make you effective in ministry, compassionate in leadership, credible in testimony, and relatable in ways you never could have been if you'd always had money. Think about Joseph in Genesis 37-50. His journey to second in command of Egypt didn't go through a straight path of success and promotion. It went through the pit where his brothers threw him, through slavery in Potiphar's house, through false accusation and imprisonment, through being forgotten by people he'd helped. Every season of loss and ruin positioned him for the purpose God had for him, to save nations from famine, including his own family who had betrayed him. If Joseph had gone straight from his father's house to Pharaoh's palace, he wouldn't have had the character, wisdom, humility, or perspective necessary to steward that much power and responsibility. The ruin, painful as it was positioning him for purpose that required exactly what the ruin developed in him. Your financial ruin is doing the same thing. It's breaking you of pride and self-reliance that would have corrupted the purpose God has for you. It's developing in you compassion for people who are struggling financially, people you would have judged if you'd never been in their shoes. It's creating in you a testimony of God's faithfulness that will encourage others. It's teaching you dependency on God that will make you dangerous in ministry because you'll know that every provision, every breakthrough comes from Him. God is also using your financial ruin to redirect your life toward kingdom purposes instead of earthly pursuits. When you were financially comfortable, you were probably focused on building your empire, growing your wealth, advancing your career. Financial ruin strips all of that away and forces you to ask bigger questions. What is God's purpose for my life? What kingdom work am I supposed to be doing? What Am I building that will outlast my bank account? The ruin is redirecting your ambition from earthly success to eternal significance. When restoration comes, and it will come, you won't go back to business as usual. You'll steward resources differently because you know they're on loan from God. You'll use money differently because you understand it's a tool for kingdom purposes. You'll give more generously because you've experienced what it's like to need help. And you'll have a ministry to people in financial crisis that you never could have had if you'd never experienced financial ruin yourself. Your mess will become your message. Your test will become your testimony. Here's what's imperative. Don't waste your financial ruin by becoming bitter, resentful, or stuck in a victim mentality. Don't spend the rest of your life angry at God for allowing this. Instead, let God use this season to position you for purpose, because the purpose God has for you on the other side of this financial ruin is bigger than anything you lost. Subscribe for more biblical truth about God's faithfulness in crisis.